Todd. Today I'm going to talk to you guys about using engines as an application platform and some of the decisions that are going to inevitably come up when you choose to go that route. So I've got a lot to cover today, so it's going to be fast and furious, so buckle your seatbelts. So first, let's talk about what an application platform is when I talk about it, because it can mean a few things to different people. So really what I'm talking about is a collection of separate applications that are tied together by a single cohesive user experience, and these applications hopefully can share common assets between each other to reduce the amount of duplication that they have to do to create that common experience. But at the same time, these applications have separate business goals, so they have separate interests and different goals in what they do. They might release on their own schedules. Some might want to release weekly, some might want to release every month, whatever. And then they all have their own cultures and internal best practices and standards. Some might like semicolons, some might not, and other trolly stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and make a bold statement and say engines are what led to Ember winning as the technology of choice in my company. And let me give you a little backstory to that. So we essentially had three separate web technologies at one point, different apps and different things. So we had some Angular apps, we had some Knockout apps, we had Ember. And there was a point where our product team and our user experience team said, well, we need to make this one cohesive experience because people buy us as a suite. They want to be able to use these things together and not have to go find URLs or bookmark things or whatever. So we made it work together. So we used an iframing post-message strategy, which got pretty interesting. There was one case where we had Ember as the application shell and then an iframe with Angular in it, and then an iframe with that with and Ember in it again. And so we made some interesting things happen, but we made it work. But it wasn't quite what we wanted it to be long term. And then engines came out, and it allowed us to kind of knock off the other user experiences, and we have nothing but Ember love at this point. So some of the reasons that engines came along and allowed us to do this was its ability to give autonomy to the team. So every application can be in a separate repo. There's some more barriers between being able to break each other, and then more accountability because the applications can set up their own processes, their own linting standards, their own coding standards, their own builds. Name spacing kept us from stomping on each other. Asset sharing was a really big thing. As you can imagine, you're limited in the number of things you can share between a Knockout app, an Angular app, and an Ember app. So it allowed us to share components and services. Lazy loading, which is a must, I think, if we use engines, because as you get bigger and bigger and bigger, your JavaScript download for everything together gets a little wacky. And then finally, like a big thing for us was technical consistency. So the fact that each of these application teams can be using the same technology, sharing best practices, building off each other, which was a big thing for us. So, I could end the talk here and say, woo, engines. They won, Ember won, yay. But really the point of my talk was, us making that decision to go in on Ember and to, redo some of our apps as Ember engines. That was really the beginning of our story because it opened up a lot of decisions for us that we needed to make to make this thing successful. So I'll start a little bit about myself. I'm a senior developer at Genesis. Genesis is a customer service software company. So our Ember app is an app for this application suite called Pure Cloud. And so Pure Cloud is a cloud-based customer service. So a customer can just subscribe to us and doesn't have to bring in any hardware or software into their system. And we offer them all these great things for their customer service organizations. We also offer a lot of real-time collaboration type of stuff like video conferencing and chat and things like that you'd think you'd need as a customer service employee, but it benefits the rest of the company as well. I'm also a contributor to the Ember Learn team, so we do a lot of infrastructure for Ember. We do a lot of the documentation stuff. So if you have any questions or anything's difficult, feed it back to us. We're taking the heat for that. And then finally, I'm a organizer for Triangle Ember Meetup, and so try to do some stuff around the local North Carolina area where I live. So a little bit more about our Ember application. That little link there is a talk I gave a little while ago that kind of gives a non-compressed backstory. We were a startup just a few years ago, and we were on pre-Ember 1.0. So that was us. We started off as like an Ember collaboration app. We connected to a company's directory and pulled in everybody and their skills and certifications and allowed people to import that stuff, and then automatically group people so you could have different groups and chat groups based on that. We got acquired a couple times, and today we're an application platform. So it's essentially the same screen I showed earlier, but now a lot more launch point links to the whole app suite. And so essentially how it works is these top menu items are our application suite, and those things are routable and they launch into different applications. And then the side items are these built-in UI services that our UI provides. So as you're, for instance, reviewing a customer service interaction, you can actually open up a chat and chat with your peers, or you can start a video conference, or you can open the help as you're going through the administration console and different things like that. So we provide those routable engine applications, but then we also provide UI services on top of that. So a few stats about our company. We're somewhere in the range of 50 to 100 Ember developers. We have 10 engines right now, but we're adding more as things move over to it. And then we try to keep things moving, 2 to 4 deployments a month. Optimally, we release every week. So we're big, and we try to keep things rolling. But how did we get there, I guess, is really the question. So, starting engines, we had a lot of questions that we needed to answer. First of all is really, how do we avoid breaking each other? So there was a time where things were all kind of in the same repo, and we had a lot of build breaks and stuff like that. And engines help with that, but there was, it opened up some other subtle ways that we started to break each other, and so we had to come up with some answers there. The first one is dependencies. So every engine has its own add-ons that it uses, and sometimes they overlap. So for instance, if you say you have add-on X, and engine A uses add-on X at 1.0, engine B decides to let's try the newest, latest, greatest add-on X at 2.0, then you're going to run into some problems. I don't know about Alderon level problems, but what will happen with our friend NPM and with the Ember build is that the NPM tree will have both of the add-ons, and then when things build, one will win one of those add-ons. And it won't just be it's going to use add-on 1 instead of add-on 2. It's going to use the add-on it picks, and it's going to lay it on top of the old add-on. And so you might have some other things on there. So you'll get some weird issues if things don't break. So our solution to that was semantic versioning and communication with each other. And so that can get our teams back loving each other, or at least not killing each other. If you want to find out, and I saw that the previous talk mentioned semantic versioning, and it's been very beneficial to us. So I suggest you read up on it, and it can help you take each other off your people to kill lists, I think, from here. So some practical suggestions. So we really try to be disciplined about caret dependencies. I know because I've worked on more individual Ember apps that people don't think about the semantic versioning too much. And when you default install add-ons, it kind of pins them. But you really want to try for caret versioning because if both of your engines are depending on the same thing, you don't, when that thing comes out with a new feature, you don't want to have to go through all the ceremony for just patch releases or even for minor releases of, hey, let's pick up this level, let's pick up this level at the same time, let's put them into the app at the same time to avoid any windows of things breaking each other. So if at all possible, I mean, if you're following the rules of semantic versioning, then just taking the latest should work itself out fairly well, unless you find that you lose trust in it. There are a couple of instances where we lose trust in an add-on and we have to at least pin it to a patch. But and I say except Ember there because Ember is so pervasive that, and we've used it for so long that an Ember upgrade can break some things that even Ember doesn't realize that it broke, and maybe it's some ways that we've used it in not so great a way. Another tip is to lint your dependencies as part of your build. There's this great add-on called Ember CLI dependency lint, and it will actually break your test cases and break your build when it detects that there's two different engines that have add-ons that are at different levels. And so it just inspects your NPM tree and will let you know. And this is great because it keeps those breaks from actually getting deployed. Now we treat, when you upgrading dependencies, like if you do want to go add-on version 1 to add-on version 2, a major dependency bump will require major dependency bumps all the way up. So for instance, if engine A wants to upgrade add-on X to 2.0, then engine A is also going to have to go up a major version. And what that does is it requires the parent app to make the decision of when it's good to go, and we usually solve that through an automation gate. Finally, this is something we don't think about a lot either, especially since things a lot of times install into dev dependencies. But when you make an add-on, make your dependencies public, at least the dependencies that your parent are going to need at runtime. There's sometimes we've gotten trolled because we put a dependency in dev dependencies and we just lucked out when we got in because the parent already included it. But then, another dependency came in, switched up the tree, and then we started getting breaks, and it wasn't obvious where that was. And so you have to think through kind of where your dependencies are going to go. And then finally, we do some add-on development, and we do some things with Broccoli and the tree for hooks. And sometimes those tree for hooks are going to access stuff out of the dependencies. For instance, if you are pulling in a style sheet or some kind of asset from a dependency and building it into your JavaScript or one of your vendor files, then you're since we use npm, and npm, sometimes they say this is a plus, but I don't think it is. NPM touts themselves as non-deterministic with their tree when they create their dependency trees. And so you really can't guarantee that the tree is going to be where you think it is. And so if your add-on is assuming that a dependency is going to be in its direct parent, then it might not always be there. And we've had things like that. We've added a new engine and shooken up the tree, and then some of our add-ons are broken. So you really need to be careful. And so when you access other dependencies, you really have to put in logic that kind of walks up the tree and looks for the thing that you're looking for, the other dependency. I just included a change for upgrading Ember. That can get us sometimes. I'm not saying that Ember is smelly. I'm saying that sometimes our usage of Ember causes kind of some smelly upgrades. So what we try to do is as soon as we upgrade our Ember, we create a new Ember upgrade branch for the next level. We require our engines. So our engines don't have to upgrade Ember every time because it uses our parent's Ember version, our parent app. But we do require that they use Ember try so that they can know on every build that they keep up to release at least, because that's where we try to keep our application. And then we gate the Ember upgrade branch. We run a big battery of tests on it to gate the actual upgrade. And then finally, the engine owners actually have to approve it. And so we have to, we'll have to get on to them to make sure we're continually upgrading Ember just to get their okay. Now, I think what we're realizing, we're not quite there yet, is that really keeping our upgrade branch up with the Ember beta, because we want to be on current at all times with Ember because of our usage of engines and just the new stuff coming out with performance and different things like that. We want to keep as close to Ember as we can, or feel safe and stable with. And so keeping that upgrade branch at beta is where we're trying to get to make sure, like, if Ember breaks us in some way, that we can feed that back into the core code to make sure that when we do upgrade, that it's smooth as possible. So next thing is how do we test? So that leaves a couple of decisions, right? Because you have now this kind of tree of applications and add-ons. And so one way to go would be just to drop all the tests at the application level. We went a slightly different way just because our application is growing so large. So we tend to try to push as many tests down to engines and add-ons as we can. So keep tests local. And it kind of goes into that theme of autonomy that we had, where each engine team is kind of accountable for their code and the way they do things. And so some of the upsides of this is that it distributes a load of tests. So we're not creating one large suite that runs all day and night or whatever. We've distributed it out to smaller, quicker suites. Like I said, it keeps teams accountable. It gates builds for each engine so that when an engine builds and bumps its version, before it bumps its version, we're sure that it passes its automation suite so that it doesn't break the parent. And we really try to adhere to test pyramid, and because of the size of our application, we're really cognizant of the speed of our tests. And so what this is really saying is that the higher level your tests, and so you can think of the bottom side of the pyramid as your Ember integration and unit tests, and then kind of the middle is your Ember acceptance tests. And then at the very top, we have an end-to-end suite. We usually run through Cucumber, but there's a variety of technologies you can use with that. But that really kind of sets up onto deployed servers and does a lot of data setup and teardown. And so the further up that triangle you go, the slower your tests. So we really separate our tests out into those three sections. And the first two sections really gate our builds and our local environments. And so we really want those to be fast. And there's different ways you can go, because I've heard some folks say that we just do all acceptance tests because that's really effective for us. But for us, like, our developers start complaining because it takes 3 to 4 minutes to run all our unit integration and acceptance tests, since we're trying to get that down right now, because we have things like pre-push hooks and different things like that keep people from uploading broken stuff to Git. So really be cognizant of that as your application grows. So how do we share? So we tend to, and you can do this in different ways because Engines allows you to have shared services, right? And so we tend to try to push as much to add-ons as we can. It doesn't make sense always for everything, but wherever we can, we push that into an add-on. So that's why I say prefer common to shared. So shared is, it lives on the parent app and we share it down to an engine. We prefer to kind of keep the tree unidirectional, so all the dependencies are downward. And so this helps for like testing, especially because, like I mentioned, we want each engine to be autonomous, and so we want them to fire up their own acceptance tests. And when you have to do that, then you have to accommodate for services shared from the parents, right? So you either have to somehow extract that, bring it into your acceptance test, or if it's an add-on, then you just have it and you don't have to do anything. So the next thing is, how do you split these add-ons, right? So we're developing a lot of internal add-ons for things like common components and styles. And so you can either put all of those into one ginormous add-on. It makes it simple for engines, right? Can they just say, rely on this add-on and I get everything I need in the app suite? But then you're not using the most effective maybe way at all times to do that, especially with, you might not even need or use most of it. So what we've done is kind of done a little bit more pragmatic approach to it. So we are more fine-grained with public add-ons. So we have a public GitHub thing. And so some of our add-ons we actually publish to the world. And those we want to kind of keep fine-grained and keep, they do one thing and they're useful, for what they do. So if you just want WebRTC functionality, then you can get that add-on. If you want data visualizations, then we have an add-on for that. And then we have these things called major add-ons. And these add-ons are crafted into an add-on because of their management or maintenance. Like our chat components add-on is maintained by a single team, right? And so we're almost treating that like an engine, where that team is, coming up with their own tests, having their own practices and stuff like that. Then we have basic asset add-ons. And so these are add-ons that you could use in any Ember application and not just ours. And so we do that with like styles and stuff. And then finally, we have a suite add-on. So this is like everything else. So we have a common, practices. We have a couple of major component suite add-ons, and those component suites have their own, really rigid and structured stuff, since all the apps teams share them. So we don't want everybody coming in and doing different things, and then, having, if anybody else comes in to fix something because they're using it too, we don't want them to be lost, or, we don't want that to get out of control. So next question is, how in the world do we build and deploy with all these different applications in this main app in our suite? So we try to get every engine app and add-on to have these kind of aspects. So our company uses GitFlow. So essentially we have different branches that gate different stages of our development. So new features go into feature branch. Once that feature is ready, you can put it into develop. Develop's just taking whatever the latest dependency is on things, and it's kind of, man, this thing's in the wrong place. And then then we have release, which is we're gearing up for a release. We actually yarn lock. We use yarn for our release branch. We lock the dependencies there, so it's just not picking up the latest of everything. So some random add-on that we, pull in that's not even ours can't break us right before we go to prod. And then finally, our master is what goes out and gets deployed. Either for our app, it goes into S3, and then for an engine, it's an npm publish that our app picks up. So speaking of branch deployments, we try to get each of those major branch types to be deployed. So it gets put on a certain S3 somewhere that we can access and run automated tests against. Engine branches get deployed for tests. So the same thing with engines. So they have automated test suites. They get deployed with a snapshot of our parent app, so that we can run a full set of tests on a specific level of an engine. And then to ship, we npm publish for our engines, and then we deploy to prod, like I mentioned, for our app. Then finally, our automation is really our big gate of deployment. So our Ember suite will break builds. So that's our quick feedback, right? And then our end-to-end suite, like I mentioned earlier, actually gates our app. So for prod, it gates it before we go into master. We make sure we have a good test suite run. And then finally, for an engine, before we publish a version to NPM, we make sure we have good test suite runs. So what's next for us, and what are the decisions upcoming that we haven't even figured yet, but these are things that are kind of on our radar. First is patching. So I think what would be cool is now that we're moving into lazy engines, that if we want to patch an engine at runtime, we shouldn't really have to build the whole suite and redeploy everything, since everything's in their own JavaScript file. Wouldn't it be cool if we could just swap that JavaScript file out at runtime in prod? But so we're starting to look into that a little bit. Managing the size of our app. Is there duplication in add-ons? Is there, especially now that we're lazy loading stuff, how can we keep things as small as possible? Ease of deployment. As new engines come on, can we write blueprints that enable that, where you can just install your new engine and get it added to the list of application menus and stuff like that? So I think that'll be helpful, because we also offer the ability for our clients to install applications onto our platform. It would be interesting to have Ember as an option. Third party, just like what I mentioned. And then finally, managing outages. I don't know if you guys noticed a couple weeks ago, but like S3 went down for like the East Coast. So that's really driven us to think about, like, all our services were still available, but the UI was hosed because it was served off of S3. And so that's really pushed us to start looking into PWAs across progressive web apps across our application suite. And then finally, cultural questions. And so, the figuring out builds and deployment and tests and stuff is all great, but we have a diverse set of teams that come from different backgrounds. Like I mentioned before, we're a set of acquisitions with different cultures and different ways of doing things. So how do we, communicate across these diverse and global teams? Like, we've had teams in India, we've had teams in California, we have teams in Indiana, so in North Carolina. So how do we kind of keep everybody on the same page, or at least enough to push a lot of the technical initiatives that we have? And so similar to Slack, on our chat we have an ember.js channel where all the teams look into. You can see what things I like to shoot with a gun, like Bauer and Phantom. In that room, we make sure that questions are always answered, especially a lot of teams transitioning from Angular and stuff like that. That it's kind of like their help support network. We share links. We kind of keep everybody up with new stuff in Ember and best practices and blog posts. We pitch ideas even before we have a new design and stuff. We can use it to discuss. And also we garner reviews. So PRs are part of our big process of getting things into promotion, not just automation. And so that's where you say, hey, I got a review. And we like to share gifts. And then so we want nobody to kind of be on an island in this distributed set of applications that we have. So we scratch each other's backs. We also have this best practice series. And so essentially every other week we get together and we talk about some of the design stuff and some of Ember best practices, since that's a lot of that, is Ember is a big and feature-rich framework. And so there's a lot of different ways to do stuff, and there's a lot of best practices that people kind of learn as they go. So we got to ramp people up quick, and so we, educate people on, especially for this example, there's a Semver thing, and so these are some of the topics we've done so far, and we continue to do them. We've stolen an RFC process from Ember, and so when we do stuff that goes cross-app, we actually create an RFC with a similar template that Ember has, and get team buy-in. So the things that helps is it helps document what we're doing. For instance, like our upgrade process that I talked about earlier. It publicizes it to the team, say, hey, this is what we're doing. And then it gets buy-in from the teams before it goes out. And so they get to voice their concerns, and we get to talk through stuff and make updates as we need to. And then finally, we also have a living style guide, which we also lifted from last EmberConf. And so in our common components that we create, we actually try to document those the best we can, and give all the arguments for the components and show them in a demo, so that teams can kind of pick from their catalog of what they can use for further problems. So we really want to create a contribution culture, and so we're using some of the lessons we learned by participating in the Ember community and trying to feed them back to participate across teams and common stuff. And so we have a core team, a task board, detailed tasks, and help wanted tasks. So we build all those things into like a common thing, and so we really try to get people to commit back as they're doing stuff and building onto the framework across teams. And that's all I had. Thanks. You can contact me on Twitter. I'm on Ember Slack, and that is the URL to the actual slides, and I will put that on Twitter as well. So thanks.